I was a massive Dragon Ball fan as a kid, and I loved seeing what kind of games were out there. I was playing Budokai Tenkaichi 2 non-stop, and I tried Burst Limit at a friend's place, and I was just blown away. And I even spent some time on the Half-Life mod called Earth Special Forces. When looking into retro Dragon Ball games, I mostly focused on the Super Nintendo and Sega Mega Drive. There were some solid games from that era, but the 5th generation always seemed like a weird time to be a Dragon Ball fan, since it was both the first time the games were starting to be localized more consistently, but also the first time they were tapping into 3D. I've seen a lot of opinions on some of these games, some of which are very negative, so I figured I'd try out every 5th generation Dragon Ball game I could, starting with a quick look at Dragon Ball Z, Legendary Super Warriors for the Game Boy Color. It's a card-based RPG, with combat being split into 2 phases, attack and defense. There's several card types that can be used on one of or both of these phases. There's a plethora of unique cards to discover throughout the world, and some of them even have you do quick time events. The battle system is really deep. I didn't get far enough to truly understand everything about it. I just wanted to get a little taste of what the game had to offer, but it goes all the way up to the Buu saga, and it tells a lot of its story through Gohan's perspective, which sadly means that we don't really get any Raditz outside of a tiny bit of the opening cutscene. Speaking of which, there's a lot of amazing pixel art in this game. The portraits and backgrounds look so good for the Game Boy Color, though the cutscenes are mainly just text, and a lot of it too, and the text is pretty badly translated. A lot of errors that just add up to make the story feel off. Though if you're playing it, you've likely read or watched Dragon Ball, so it probably won't matter much. The only issue is that you can't skip the cutscenes, so there'll probably be a lot of spamming the A button to just try to make it go faster. But the gameplay is deep and it's interesting. If it seems cool to you, it's worth a shot. Next, we're going to the new kid on the block for this generation, the PlayStation 1, which easily outsold its competition. This is the system a lot of people first played 3D games on, and a lot of people's first experience with Dragon Ball games. Let's start with Dragon Ball GT Final Bout. I'm not a big fan of GT, it's got its moments, but much like Super, I don't enjoy it much. I kinda like to pretend that Dragon Ball Z just ended at the Buu saga. Anyways, moving on. Dragon Ball GT Final Bout is kind of a 2D fighter but with 3D elements, and it's slow and sluggish as hell. I feel like it's the type of game where just looking at the janky gameplay tells you everything you need to know. I will say, I don't think the graphics are bad, but that's kind of the only compliment I can give. It's nice that it's got a tournament mode, or at least it would be if the gameplay was any fun. The only modes are Battle, Tournament, and Build Up, the latter of which is a mode where you slowly train and become more powerful while fighting other characters. There's a few unlockable characters, but I don't care to get them. Honestly, the most fun aspect of this game is the weird English dub. This doesn't use the Funimation or Ocean English dubs that most people are familiar with. It uses a whole new cast, but only for the pre and post battle quotes. The in-game voices are still clearly the Japanese actors, so you can just tell when it switches. Here's a quick comparison between the Funimation dub and GT Final Bout.
You certainly are brave.
Now let me show you the force of my true power.
Can you transform into a Super Saiyan at will?
I don't have time to deal with a weakling like you.
For him! And for everyone else you've destroyed!
You look strong. This should be a good fight.
He triumphs that loses everything. The vanquished escapes.
Let me show you the terror of my power, which is the ultimate in the universe.
That little ruse only succeeded in pissing me off.
Even if there is no hope, why don't you worry about yourself?
Unless you're in a hurry to die. Keep moving.
You're the one who will disappear from this world.
It's wild how different it is, but that's kind of all I have to say about this game. It's just really rough. Next up, we got Dragon Ball Z Ultimate Battle 22. The 22 stands for the amount of playable characters in the game, or at least for the initial roster. This game has an amazingly animated opening, and all the sprite work was actually animated by Toei Animation, which is really cool. And again, 22 playable characters, that's a fairly large roster. That's where the positives end though. I mean, look at this game. It might be a little little faster paced than GT Final Bout, but it feels and looks worse. When the characters fly up, they come closer to the camera, which just makes them look larger, and it throws the scale off completely. And there's no victory quotes or animations or anything. When you win, you just stand there. There are some cutscenes, but they should have just used clips from the show. It just looks terrible. The cutscenes are also exclusive to the Japanese version, at least from what I can find. I think blending pixel art or 2D elements with 3D can work, like with Marvel vs. Capcom 2, but here it just looks so cheap and ugly, and the way that the art is compressed just looks terrible. The gameplay modes are the same as the previous game I talked about: battle mode, champion mode, and tournament mode, and the same build-up system where you fight to train your chosen character. Also, the character select screen is awful. Just look at this. Okay, now Vegeta. And then it goes to Android 18. Okay, so back here, down is Vegeta. Okay, it's up Tien. Okay, and then up again. Up again is not Boo. I have to go left to go Boo. Okay. And then up again is Raccoon. Okay. So if I want to go for Frieza right now, is it just going to be left and down? No, not down. Down goes to Boo. Then left. There's a handful of unlockable characters, but it's just not worth it. I honestly find the older Butoden games to be way more fun. Here I got Butoden for the Mega Drive, which is one of the Butoden games, and it looks and plays way better. It's got some character interactions and cutscenes, and it's way more impressive, way more fun, and on much weaker hardware too. But when it comes to Ultimate Battle 22, man, it's such a shame that these cool hand-drawn animations were wasted on a game like this. But, oh, what's this? Oh yeah, here comes the underdog of the 5th generation. While Sega wasn't doing well during this time, the Sega Saturn was surprisingly a decent success in Japan, and the Japanese library of games is almost 4 times larger than the rest of the world. And here we have a game that uses the same hand-drawn animation: Dragon Ball Z Shin Butoden. It continues the gameplay style of the previous Butoden games. The intro animation is actually mostly the same, just edited differently. And boom, fantastic title screen. Here we got battle mode, tournament mode, and Mr. Satan mode. Within battle mode, we have a sort of arcade mode where you select a character and the CPU selects one randomly, and you fight one character at a time, and then you get a short little cutscene at the end. Then you have free battle where you choose a character and you choose your opponents, or you can play 2 players or watch 2 CPUs fight. And there's team battle where you select multiple characters for each team and try to beat all your enemies. I jump into the normal battle mode, and you get these cool portraits where you hear some lines from the characters, sometimes addressing each other by name. The fight starts, and wow, this game looks so much better. The backgrounds are awesome looking. You can even get knocked into the backgrounds and it changes the perspective. Some backgrounds have elements that you can interact with or get knocked into, though this one stage has some annoying foreground elements that get in the way, but you know, just don't play this stage, I guess. It split screens just like the Butoden games, but it's so smooth here. The game plays just as well as the Butoden games too, and it just feels a lot better than Ultimate Battle 22. The combos, the supers, it's all here and it looks great. You can also knock characters off screen and it's cool, but it slows down the gameplay too much. Speaking of, this game has a turbo mode and I highly recommend playing it this way. It just feels way better. The loading screens also have a bunch of cute animations of different characters doing different stuff. But the big shocker to me is the Mr. Satan mode. It's a story mode about the amazing, the sweet, the darling himself, Mr. Hercule Satan, and it's fully voice acted and has cutscenes. I was stunned to see this. It's a fantastic mode and it really surprised me. The gameplay involves you making bets on people in the tournament, and you try to rig the game to make money. It's such a goofy mode, what a wild idea, but it's really funny. This game is great as a whole, and it's a huge shame we never got it in the West. It's another Butoden game, and it's a great entry in the series. There's one last game I want to look at, and this one's interesting because it's both on the Sega Saturn and the PlayStation 1. Dragon Ball Z: The Legend, released only in Japan and Europe. I'll be focusing on the Sega Saturn version, and it's really just for one reason. The gameplay is just faster. That's the major difference here. This game has a story mode called Z Campaign, and a battle mode. In the battle mode, you can have up to 3 characters at a time duke it out in one big fight, but I have to check out the story mode first. You get these comic-style panels floating around while the narrator explains what's going on. Then you're on to the first fight, and it's against Nappa. The game takes place in a 3D environment, with sprite-based characters, and it makes for a really unique looking game. It's a cool blend of 2D and 3D. You can break background elements too. The speed can just be wild as you're knocking your opponent around, or getting knocked around yourself. You can shoot key blasts and fly all over the place. The weird thing about the controls is that the up button always means approach the enemy, and the down button always means retreat. So it can get confusing when the enemy is below you, but you gotta press up to fly down to them. It's not the biggest deal in the world, it just takes some time to adjust to. Because of the way the camera moves, I definitely understand why they did this. The fact that they had to animate all these sprites from several different angles is just wild, and seeing a bunch of characters flying around and fighting really gives you that Dragon Ball feel. You also have this power balance meter that goes up when you do damage, but your opponent gains power when they hit you. It's about trying to get your color to fill the bar, and once you do one of your character's super attacks, and every character has 2 of them. This is one of the notable areas where the PlayStation 1 and Saturn versions differ, where the PlayStation 1 uses more 3D elements and the Saturn uses more pixel art. The story mode isn't super long, but it does cover a lot of the main fights up to the Buu saga, and you unlock new characters along the way. It's a really cool game, and one of the more unique Dragon Ball games out there. It's fast paced, frantic, and really cool. And those are the 5th generation Dragon Ball games that I could find. It's an interesting era for gaming in general, and just taking a look at how the Dragon Ball franchise specifically handled the jump to the next generation was really interesting. With the standouts being the Sega Saturn games, those were really something special. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you found it interesting. Thanks for watching.